I know I have been up here a lot over the last 2 days, but everything's kind of culminating to this moment where we're going to pull together a little bit of everything that you guys have learned. And I've been teasing that I'm going to tell my story, but it didn't mean to be like suspenseful or anything. At first, it was just my way of saying, I'm not going to tell you the thing now because I'm going to tell you the thing later, and now it's later. How are you guys feeling after all of this? Yeah? If you're feeling a lull, I see a lot of brownies on the table still. And if you don't eat them, I'm probably going to eat them. All right, this is our last session here today. Like I said, to pull all of this together, and this is my presentation on overcoming challenges and making an impact. So my story starts with a broken heart. Aww. How many of you have had a broken heart in your life? I know you know what I'm talking about. So I was married, and I thought it was forever. I knew that my marriage was hard, but I thought that marriage was hard because that's the narrative you kind of always hear, right? So I was going along, living my life here in the Rogue Valley. I was a photographer, photographing women, when I found out that my husband was having an affair. And there was some serious betrayal trauma that happened to me for that. And when I confronted him, he said that not only was it true, but that he wanted to be with her. And that was excruciating. And I felt like I had hit rock bottom. And I went to a counselor. And within the first hour, she told me, actually, Lauren, your ex-husband or your husband at the time is actually very emotionally abusive. And I thought, no, I mean, I know he's like angry and it's really hard and difficult, but he's not abusive. He's never hit me. I didn't understand what emotional abuse was, and she recommended that I read some literature. And I started picking up some books and reading some articles about narcissistic abuse. And then I really hit my rock bottom because I thought, oh my gosh, this is how I've been living. This explains everything that I've been going through. But then over here, I had this really difficult job of reconciling myself, this confident, educated, well-traveled, cultured, intelligent woman who came from a great home, reconciling her with a person who had been experiencing abuse. And I thought, how the frick did I get here? And that's when I became obsessed with this notion that nobody's exempt from abuse. It doesn't matter if you think you're smarty pants. There are people out there who see your vulnerabilities and who will make their way in, which is what we've learned here today. And what I learned from my situation is that it wasn't that dissimilar from how traffickers target their victims. It almost always starts with emotional abuse before physical abuse. Because if you just hit someone on day one, they would leave. But it's not that simple. And so I was literally crushed. I had to figure out how I was going to navigate this new life, newly divorced. And I also had to figure out what is my identity? Like, who am I? Because I'm not who I thought I was. And I thought of this question: can you heal a broken heart through helping others? And this sounds very noble, but I'm going to be honest. I was desperate. I was so hurt, and I was in so much pain. I thought, maybe if I can meet people who have experienced abuse and who have survived it, maybe they can teach me how to do it. And so I had this idea. I already ride motorcycles. I'm a professional photographer of women. What if I could get on my bike and travel around and meet people who have experienced abuse? And again, maybe they can teach me how I can heal from it. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll check out some domestic violence shelters. And this was like this was very naive of me. You can't just like walk up to a domestic violence shelter, first of all. And second of all, like, you can't just put someone in front of your camera and not know like what level of healing they've had. And I could have re-traumatized, like, it's just crazy. It was a crazy idea. And a couple of people in the community said to me, well, have you ever heard of Rebecca Bender? She's a local survivor of human trafficking. And I was like, trafficking? Like in Cambodia? Right? I had no awareness of what this looks like and how it happens. And someone introduced me to Rebecca, and she was very gracious to take a phone call from me, total stranger, boudoir photographer at that. And we had a conversation, and within about 10 minutes, she explained to me those cycles of abuse. And I learned that, wow, what was happening in my marriage was like, again, what happens with traffickers. And then she started to tell me more about it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is my mission, right? And I'm just months out of my situation. My situation blew up in November. By March, I had this idea. By June, I was on the phone with Rebecca Bender. We decided to partner together. And by September, I was on the road. It was crazy. So what we decided to do was reach out to her network of survivors. And I know she told you guys yesterday quite a bit about the Elevate Academy, her online school. We have some graduates in the room, you can tell. So she has this network. At the time, this was 2016, she had 100 graduates. That's how far they've come. And so she sent out an email to her entire network of survivors around the country and said, this is Lauren, she's a photographer, she might be riding through your city, and if you'd like to take us up on the offer of free professional photography, send us an email. And it was overwhelming. We had to cap it at 40. And so I decided to go on the road, like I said, in September, and do 10,000 miles around the country and photograph and meet 40 survivors. I did this on my Ducati Monster, lovingly referred to as the Monster. Real creative, I know. And that's what I did. I will tell you guys, this is probably the most impractical bike to go any amount of long distance on, but I did it. So I started here at home. It was really cool. We had an event at SOU, and we had a great turnout. Some people who were there at that very first trip are here today. Raise your hand if you were there. We got a couple longtime supporters. Thank you, guys. And from here, I went north, cut across to Coeur d'Alene, all the way over to Michigan, through the Upper Peninsula, back down to Indiana, over to New York City, all the way down the coast to Jacksonville and St. Augustine, Florida, up to Memphis, back down through Texas. Through New Mexico, I visited my family, stayed with my grandma, and then I came up the California coast. Here's a picture of me on the road. So just so you know, when I'm on the road, I'm camping for the most part. Again, very impractical. They make adventure bikes for this, but who needs that when you got an Italian sport bike? And enough luggage to sleep on. It was an incredible journey. I hit so many states. I went by myself. That's something that surprises people a lot. And they say, well, don't you want to ride with people? And at the time, I didn't. I don't usually ride with people, just my dad. But now I know that I have to go at it alone because I'm meeting survivors, and I'm not going to show up with a whole entourage of strangers, right? The journey, that's when I traded in my wheels for something a little different. Pennsylvania, Florida. This wasn't a very arduous journey. I rode through heat, rain. It was freezing. It was hot. When I hit Florida, guess what else also hit Florida? Hurricane Matthew. I broke down a couple of times. My back hurt from being on the tent and then on the bike and then back in the tent and then on the bike. But I made it all the way back home. It was a pretty incredible journey. Over 2 months on the road. Thank you. But the highlight was really meeting the survivors. Again, I had met Rebecca Bender in June and did not know what trafficking was. And then a couple of months later, I'm on the road and I'm meeting survivors face to face. One thing to know about the survivor portraits that I do, the portraits are a gift, which means I do not ask for anything in return. Specifically, they are not obliged to tell me their story. It's not an interview. Survivors have been exploited commercially. It would be really weird to then ask them to say, I'll take your photo, but you have to tell me your story, right? So this is something that we learned as trauma-informed people. We ask for nothing in return. They don't even have to sign a model release. Nobody even knows they have to do a photo shoot. Quite a bit of survivors, quite a few of them, have signed model releases. You're going to see some of the photos, and quite a few of them have shared their stories with me, which is beautiful and a true honor. But these survivors come from all walks of life. I photographed male survivors, and they said things like, people don't realize boys are trafficked too. We haven't talked about that a lot at this conference, but it's true. Hopefully photo shoots like this can change that narrative. The other thing these photo shoots are is a celebration. If you Google human trafficking, what comes up? Photos of people in bondage with hands over their mouths, they're crying, they're chained to radiators. That's not the image of survivors I know. That's a massive misrepresentation. This is what survivors look like. A lot of these survivors are leaders. They have their own organizations. They're doing policy work, prevention work, restoration work. Until this photo shoot, the only photo I had of myself was from when I was in exploitation and my mugshot. Most of them have criminal records. Rebecca spoke about that. Tina spoke about that. The LGBTQ community, heavily affected by this issue. These are just really beautiful people, I have to tell you. I heard things like, I never knew my eyes sparkled like that. Some of these pictures you might recognize as the ones outside. They're some of the ones that I did on my very first journey. Wendy Barnes, she actually wrote the book that Rebecca said was so good. It was like the best written book, the best writing and everything. That's Wendy Barnes. She wrote that book. What's the title of that book? No, I forgot. I'm sorry. What's that? No one? Okay. Life Continues. Thank you. And Life Continues by Wendy Barnes. Some more nonprofit leaders for you. So my dear friend Jessa, I have always felt that I wore my exploitation like a sign on my forehead. Now I can see myself as beautiful. This is something I really heard from a lot of survivors, that they don't feel like how we see them. They feel like judgment and their trauma and what they've experienced, they feel like all of that just shines through on the outside. And with my camera, I'm able to show them that actually this is you, because I don't use lights. I'm a natural light photographer. I have one lens. I don't even have a zoom, so sometimes I'm all up in their face. Some of the survivors here know what I'm talking about. We don't do professional hair or makeup. You guys recognize Christine? Being trafficked as a child meant I never felt valued. With Lauren, I felt valued and celebrated. I have photographed Christine 4 or 5 times, because every time we hang out, I'm like, let's do a photo shoot. And it's been so fun to watch the evolution of her as she grows in her career as well. There's another figure you might recognize, Tina. Some of these photos were on that first journey. Some of them have been on subsequent journeys. So all in all, that journey was pretty incredible. I did 10,118 miles. I mean, who's counting? But We actually, when I left, we thought that it was going to be 9,000 miles because I mapped it out and we made all these like signs and posters, and then it was not 9,000 miles. On that road trip in 2016, I met and photographed almost 40 survivors. We raised almost $60,000 for Rebecca Bender Initiative from Facebook, from you guys, and from some of Rebecca's network as well. And any guesses on how many speeding tickets I got? Zero. That's my mom's favorite slide. How many did I deserve? That's not an appropriate question. You know there's like nobody in Montana, right? So since that time, I've gone on to photograph almost 100 survivors. We've raised over $400,000 for survivor-led organizations. We launched our online school, training and educating community members just like you guys, and we've had 25 graduates of that. It was really incredible to be able to use my passion for a purpose, right? Like, who would have thought that you could use your motorcycle and your camera to do something like this? When I came home from the road, it was so cool. I felt like a celebrity. I got invited to galas. This was Rebecca Bender's gala. The survivors gave me an award. It was so moving. I got invited on YouTube channels, on podcasts. Tom and I got invited to the Sturgis rally. I was all over the news, doing all kinds of things. I got picked to be a judge at motorcycle events. People wrote songs about me. I got invited to do the Rogue Valley Dancing with the Stars, okay? And then I won Rogue Valley Dancing with the Stars, another great charity. A highlight, we got on CNN, pretty cool. And another real highlight was I asked Keanu Reeves on a date. We filmed this whole really cool, ridiculous proposal video asking Keanu Reeves to be my date to the Rebecca Bender Gala. Local media picked it up, and then national media picked it up. And, you know, Keanu didn't say yes, but he also didn't not say yes. So, you know, you never know. So you're telling me there's a chance? It was pretty incredible. I have a lot to be proud of. But I also want to share with you the deeper truth. And the deeper truth is, while that was all very, very cool, and like I said, I'm very proud of those accomplishments and the things and the publicity, and being on the news is so fun, and you know, that's all really, really great stuff. But it was also very hard. As a photographer, I have a lot of friends who are also photographers. And while I was on the road, my good friend John David Pittman from Little Rock, Arkansas, had me stop by his studio. And he's the one who like says yes ma'am to me, and I'm like younger than him. Those country guys. He had me sit down in his studio, and he just said one question to me: how's the ride going? And this was me in that moment. I was in a lot of pain on this journey. There was a lot of consequences for me. I wrecked my body on that trip. When I came home, I had an overuse injury in both of my arms from being in this position for so long, day after day after day. So you can drive 10,000 miles, but when you ride 10,000 miles, it takes just so much longer because I only have 3 gallons in that tank. Again, I'm not saying it's practical motorcycle. So I have to pull over every 100 miles, and every 100 miles you have to take your helmet off, and you have to get the gas and go to the bathroom. It just takes longer. So I was on the road for a long, long time, and I messed up my arms. I had some sort of a thing going on in there, that little black thing. And the doctor said, all right, well, why don't we try to give you cortisone shots in both your elbows, which I thought, okay, great. A lot of people do those. Not if you have an allergy to cortisone, which I did and did not know about. So the cortisone then atrophied all the fat and tissue in both my elbow joints. So that's not like a weird growth on my elbow. That's like what your elbow bone looks like when all the fat around it is gone. So you know when you bump your funny bone and you're like, dang, this was like my life for like 24 hours a day. So I couldn't wear sweaters. I had to sleep like a vampire. And one of the worst things about this was now I couldn't ride my motorcycle. So I had an identity crisis at the end of my marriage, and then I put my whole identity into the girl who rode 10,000 miles across the country, who now can't even ride a motorcycle, and now has a motorcycle charity that she can't even participate in. So my identity crisis that I thought I fixed with a Band-Aid came back to bite me. So that question of can you heal a broken heart through helping others really is like, can you be an absolute dumpster fire and help others? Because that's what I was. If you guys aren't familiar with that term, it's just like, you're a mess. Like, I was a mess. So can you be a mess and help others? Yeah, I did it. I'm living proof that you can do that. But at what cost? I didn't just have the atrophy in my elbows. I was 109 pounds. For context, that's 15 pounds lighter than I am right now. I was having panic attacks, insomnia. When I did sleep, I would have nightmares. I had memory loss. My friend called me one day and he said, I'm having a hard time logging into my website. And I was like, oh, dang, man, that's like so frustrating. And he's like, well, can you help me? And I'm like, what? I had built my friend an entire website. It was basic, but it probably took me 3 days. And about 7 months later, I had zero recollection that I built this website. Like, I was not okay. My family's here. They remember. And then again, I had that loss of identity. So am I a disruptor for life? Absolutely. I know that I am in this for the long haul. We've talked about the long haul. I'm a disruptor for life. But I couldn't do it if I was gonna continue down that path. And so we're gonna ask of you guys to be disruptors for life. You're here, you've learned about this issue. We want you in this fight for life. We know that the victims and the survivors need you, but we also need you to be healthy. So today you saw the agency red carpet, and after this session, we're gonna ask you for 100% participation. And I'm gonna explain that more, but basically you guys are gonna stand up and go to the tables, and we're gonna ask that every single person here participate by doing something for one of these local agencies. But I don't want you guys to do that at the detriment of your own health. And so that's what I really wanna talk to you guys about today. Beyond the journey, beyond what I learned from that journey, how do you overcome challenges and make an impact without hurting yourself? I've actually come up with a 3-step process, so don't worry. These are things that I learned earlier in life and then after the road, but I've finally just been able to pull them all together. The first way to overcome a challenge and make an impact is to camp with coyotes. So this is a good story that comes from my dad. He's back there, but I love this picture of my dad. I don't know if you guys can see the face he's making over there. So this is a story that my dad told me when I was about maybe 13, 14 years old. And it's a story that happened to him and one of our family friends, Lee Duncan. So my family's like very much from the West, if you can't tell. My brother is here too, and he's named after Lee Duncan. He's a dear family friend, and he was best friend to both of my grandfathers. And my dad, around this age, went to go visit Lee Duncan in his trailer house in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. And they're talking in the kitchen, and my dad kind of looks out the kitchen window, and he sees, like, way up in the hills in the boonies, like a campfire. And he's like, Lee, someone's up in the hills, like someone's up in your hills. And Lee kind of looks out the window, and he goes, oh, yeah, that's Jan. Jan was Lee's daughter. And my dad said, well, what's she doing up there? And he said, well, Jan's afraid of coyotes. And so she's camping up there, and she ain't coming home until she ain't afraid of coyotes no more. And my dad said, well, how long has she been up there? 3 days. She was probably 19 at the time. And when my dad recounted this story to me when I was 12, 13, 14, something like that, it profoundly impacted my life. And I thought, you can do that? You can be afraid of something and do something about it? You can actually go camping with your coyotes? And I said coyotes, but cowboys would never say coyotes. It's coyotes. So what are your coyotes? What are the things that you guys are afraid of? The failure? Going to the doctor? Could be a scary one. Mortality? Letting your kids go? Starting a new business? Losing somebody that you love? Public speaking? It's not so bad. Deep water? That's real bad. You're not getting me out there. Judgment of others? What are some of these things that are really holding you back that you have fear of? Being alone? Going to therapy? I'll tell you what it is for me, or what it was for me, and it was being still. That's why in the pinnacle of the worst moment of my life, I decided, I'm going to go do this thing. Like, who does that? We all do. All of you do it. Being still is one of the hardest things that we can do. For me, it was reaching for my phone a lot. When you go camping with your coyotes, that also means not reaching for the things that you know are not good for you. So is it alcohol? Is it substances? Is it TV? Is it toxic relationships? Is it your cell phone, like it is for me? What are these things that you should not be reaching for when you should try to be still? What are your coyotes? So when you go camping with your coyotes, first, obviously, you have to identify them. Try to be still with them. Might take 3 days up in the hills. But it's that dark soul of the night when you are in a tent and you're so afraid of something and you hear those coyotes howling outside your tent walls. I know you guys have been there. But the more time you can spend there and get right with yourself, the greater chance you're going to have to overcome challenges and make an impact. So in the spirit of Jan Duncan, camp with your coyotes, until you ain't afraid of coyotes no more. That's step one to overcoming challenges and making an impact. Step two, be coachable. How many of you guys played sports growing up? Almost everybody. I like this one for men because a lot of men play sports and they'll always listen to their coach. I had a coach when I was young. That's my bro. We did martial arts growing up, and that was Jody cornering me in one of my competitions. And why I say this about men is that men will always listen to their coaches, but I want you guys to think about learning to cultivate a level of vulnerability outside of the ring, off of the football field, away from the golf course, places where normally you feel very coachable. That's awesome. You know what that feels like. Now try to take that off of the field, out of the ring, etc. We can do this by two things: practicing humility and having courage. Humility to know that we don't know everything. Tom spoke about humility earlier. And also to be able to accept that that's okay that we don't know everything. Courage to be able to ask for guidance and to display a little bit of vulnerability. It's also very important to remember that coaches and mentors come in all shapes and forms. I'm going to tell you a story about my friend Jocelyn Snow. Jocelyn Snow is a motorcycle personality, I would say. She is an absolute savage on motorcycles. She's an adventure rider. She qualified for the GS Trophy, which is literally the Olympics for adventure riding, on and off road. She did trials in all over the United States to qualify. Then she had to go to South Africa, and her team had to qualify for the actual competition that was in Mongolia. This was the first time that women had ever been included in this competition in 2019, and she made it, and she dominated. What's cool about Jocelyn, though, she rides these enormous bikes. She's 5'1". She can't even friggin' touch the ground. But she has taught herself through technique and practice to be able to be like a ballerina on these things. And she rides circles around, I mean, literally over 99% of motorcyclists in this country. And she tells this story when she gives her talks, that she's been riding motorcycles her whole life. She's owned over 40 motorcycles. She knows bikes. She fixes bikes. She races bikes. She does things like this. She had decided that she wanted the latest model of this bike, the BMW GS. And so she went to her local dealership, and she walked in, and she said, "I want the new GS." And the sales guy was like, looked at her, right? She's 5'1". For reference, that's an inch shorter than I am. And kind of gave her the runaround. And then went in the back, and then another guy came out, and she said, "I want the new GS." And he kind of gave her the same look, and next thing you know, 3 hours pass. And she's like, "Look, are you guys gonna sell me this bike, or what's going on?" And they actually told her, "We can't in good conscience sell you this bike because it's way too big for you." She was devastated. So she stormed out of there. She got in her car. She Googled the next town over and called that dealership. Some guy named Brad or something answered. And she said, "Brad," she said, she was crying, do you have the new GS in stock?" And he said, "Yeah." And she said, "If I came in there with money, would you sell it to me?" He was like, he didn't have context. He was like, "Yeah." So she did. She drove about an hour away, and she bought the bike. She got on that bike, she rode all the way to the Arctic Circle and back, came home, qualified for the GS trophy, did all of this stuff all around the world. Guess what? Now she's famous. Now she's a sponsored BMW rider, and they want her to do an event at her local BMW dealership. She said the guy did not even come out of his office while she did a whole demonstration in the parking lot. My point is, we don't always know who knows what. So who are you discounting in your life? Jocelyn Snow inspired me. I actually rode the Ducati Monster around the country because I thought I was too short to ride anything else. And then I met that woman. And I went out and bought the tallest bike that I could find. This is my new bike, the Ducati Scrambler. And I learned how to ride it. And for the first 2 months, I thought, I'm gonna die, but I did it because she showed me how, and she mentored me. I took that bike on the next journey, and I photographed survivors all the way around Washington and Canada and Utah and et cetera, and I started having survivors sign the front fender. Now there's almost no space left on that bike, right? So who are you discounting? When we talk about being coachable, yeah, our football coach, we're going to listen to him. But who else in our lives is available to teach us something? And are we paying attention to these people? Because trust me, nobody discounts Jocelyn Snow anymore. So in what areas of your life can you be more coachable? Your marriage? Guess what? There's a coach for that. They're called therapists. There's a coach for this. They're actually called business coaches. Parenting, health, relationships, finances, mental health, finding your purpose. Lisa Mannion's in the room. She's real good at helping people find their purpose. Which motorcycle to buy? That didn't get very many laughs. So here's a bonus about being coachable. Coaches and mentors will believe in you when you do not believe in yourself. And you cannot put a price on that. So in being coachable, be sure to ask, who am I discounting? Consider ways to be vulnerable outside the ring AKA outside your comfort zone. And remember that coaches believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. So what do? We be humble, we be courageous, we be coachable. All right, step 3, to overcoming a challenge and making an impact. Build community. I love this quote. There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Did you guys discover some new things to care about here? Yeah. Talking about community, a key ingredient to community is generosity. So I'm going to tell you another story about a survivor that I photographed in Florida. I rode all the way over there. This was right before the hurricane was going to hit. You'll see Morgan, her photo is outside too. She's an Elevate graduate, and we had an event in Florida, and Rebecca had said, as a graduate, would you mind saying a few words at this event that Lauren's going to do? And so she came up, and we talked about the ride, and we were raising funds, and she told this beautiful story about when you donate to Elevate Academy to support a survivor, you're committing an act of love. It's an act of love, because when you support charity, you're helping someone you will never meet. And particularly for survivors of exploitation, I mentioned this, when they receive something and they aren't asked to give anything back, that heals them. When you support charities, you're committing an act of love. This is a lesson I'm constantly trying to learn from my mom. My mom has been telling me since I was born, unconditional love, unconditional love. And I don't always get it, but I do now, particularly after that quote from Morgan. Every time you tell my mom a story about anything or anybody, she says, well, we'll just lift them up in unconditional love. I'm like, yeah, Mom, okay. But no, now I know. She's had it right all along. Acts of love, lifting people up in unconditional love, giving them things without asking for anything in return, that strengthens communities. That's what you guys are doing here today. So I have a challenge for you. Go camping with your coyotes. Practice being coachable. Build community with acts of love. And you just might be able to overcome challenges, make an impact without harming yourself in the way that I do, because I don't want anybody to do that. That's not sustainable. We've heard that from several speakers today. So in addition to today, you've learned about the issue. Would you agree? Yeah. You've identified your unique abilities through those text messages. Did you guys get some pretty cool text messages back? Some surprising things? I heard someone over here. It's like, wow, I never thought about myself that way. You've also heard the needs of your community from our tabling agents. So now, the last step is to take a stand. Now, I mentioned to you guys that I was going to ask for 100% participation. Now's the time. So I'm going to have you guys stand. You can bring your notebooks if you want, so you can have reference on which tables you're going to visit. But we're going to ask you guys, every single one of you in this room is going to do at least one thing at one of these tables. And I know you can do this because some people said just sign up for our newsletter, and I know you can do that. We also haven't asked for $10,000, so can anybody do that? That'd be awesome. Whatever it is, the one thing that you do, we want everybody to do it, because that's how we're going to make a difference in this issue. And I hope that you guys feel empowered at this point, that you can make a difference. And so when you go to a table and you feel a need, the tabling agents are going to ring the little bell. So I hope that you guys can hear in real time change being made in your community. Okay? Ready, break. We're going to have 30 minutes during this section.